Good evening, and welcome to Global Perspectives. Tonight we delve into a complex and often contentious issue. Is it ethical for businesses to move jobs to other countries? This practice, commonly known as offshoring or outsourcing, presents a significant dilemma, balancing the drive for economic progress against profound social responsibilities. To discuss this, we have two distinguished guests. Dr. Ben Carter, an economist who sees potential benefits in these global shifts, and Ms. Maria Rossi, a labor rights activist who brings to light significant concerns for workers and communities. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here. The issue of businesses relocating operations internationally is indeed multifaceted, and it's crucial to approach it with a nuanced understanding rather than a blanket condemnation. I firmly believe that such moves are not inherently unethical. In fact, when managed responsibly, they can yield substantial benefits for all parties involved. Firstly, from a business perspective, accessing global talent pools and resources significantly enhances efficiency and fosters innovation. This isn't just about cutting costs, although that can be a factor. It's about strategic positioning in a highly competitive global market. Companies that can optimize their operations internationally are often better equipped to grow, invest in research and development, and ultimately contribute more robustly to their home economies as well as the global one. Secondly, consumers stand to gain considerably. Cost savings achieved through global sourcing can translate into lower prices for goods and services. This increased affordability boosts consumer purchasing power, effectively raising living standards and providing access to a wider variety of products. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly from a global development standpoint, offshoring creates vital employment opportunities in host countries. It facilitates the transfer of skills, technology, and business practices, often acting as a catalyst for economic growth and poverty reduction in developing nations. These are not just abstract economic theories. We have seen tangible improvements in infrastructure and human capital in regions that have successfully integrated into global value chains. Of course, there are legitimate concerns about the impact on workers in the home country, and these must be addressed proactively through retraining programs and social safety nets. However, viewing offshoring solely through the lens of domestic job displacement overlooks the broader picture of mutual benefits and the increasing interconnectedness of our global economy. It is a transition, certainly, but one that can be managed for the greater good.
Thank you, Sarah and Dr. Carter. While I appreciate Dr. Carter's optimistic overview, I must present a starkly different perspective, one grounded in the often harsh realities faced by workers, both at home and abroad. The assertion that offshoring is not inherently unethical glosses over the fact that, in practice, the primary driver is frequently the pursuit of drastically lower labor costs. This pursuit often leads businesses to countries with weak or non-existent labor laws, minimal worker protections, and wage levels that are far from providing a dignified living. What is framed as development can often be, in reality, exploitation, plain and simple. Furthermore, the negative impact on the home country cannot be understated. We are talking about widespread job losses, the closure of factories that were once the bedrock of communities, and a subsequent decline in local economies. This isn't just an economic adjustment, it's the fraying of the social fabric, leading to increased inequality, despair, and a loss of skilled trades that may take generations to rebuild. The promise of new industries replacing the old often rings hollow for those directly affected. Businesses, particularly large corporations, have a profound responsibility that extends beyond their shareholders. They have a moral obligation to the employees and the communities that have supported their growth and contributed to their success over many years. To abandon these stakeholders primarily for enhanced profit margins, often at the expense of worker welfare elsewhere, represents a significant ethical lapse. Finally, this practice contributes to a damaging race to the bottom, where countries are incentivized to compete by offering ever cheaper labor and laxer regulations. This doesn't elevate global standards, it risks depressing wages and working conditions universally, undermining the very progress we should be striving for in a just global economy. The benefits, if any, are often concentrated at the top, not broadly shared.
Thank you both for those comprehensive opening statements. You've clearly delineated the core conflict, the potential for economic efficiency and global development on one hand, versus concerns about worker exploitation and domestic job displacement on the other. Dr. Carter, Ms. Rossi raises serious points about exploitation. How can businesses genuinely ensure ethical practices and fair treatment for workers when they move operations to countries with vastly different and often weaker regulatory environments?
That's a critical question, Sarah, and Ms. Rossi is right to highlight the potential for exploitation. However, it's not an inevitable outcome. Responsible businesses can, and indeed many do, uphold high ethical standards irrespective of their location. This involves implementing robust codes of conduct that go beyond local legal minimums, ensuring fair wages relative to the local cost of living, providing safe working conditions, and fostering a culture of respect for workers' rights. Transparency throughout the supply chain is also key, often supported by independent audits and certifications. It's about proactive engagement, not merely passive compliance with potentially inadequate local laws. Furthermore, the jobs created in developing economies, even if not perfect by Western standards, can be a vital step up for many individuals and families. They can offer better pay, more stable employment, and safer conditions than many locally available alternatives, such as subsistence agriculture or informal, unregulated work. In some instances, the presence of multinational corporations committed to higher standards can even exert upward pressure on local labor practices, leading to broader improvements. Regarding domestic job losses, while undeniably challenging for those affected, it's important to frame this as an aspect of dynamic economic transition rather than a zero-sum game. The appropriate response is not protectionism, which ultimately harms consumers and stifles innovation, but rather concerted investment in retraining, education, and support systems to help workers transition to new roles in evolving industries. The economy is not static. It constantly reshapes itself, and our workforce strategies must adapt accordingly.
Dr. Carter speaks of codes of conduct, but experience shows us these are often insufficient and poorly enforced, especially when the primary motive remains profit maximization at the lowest possible cost. Self-regulation has a patchy record at best. When push comes to shove, the pressure to deliver shareholder value can easily override even well-intentioned ethical guidelines. We need more than promises. We need verifiable, enforceable standards that are independently monitored, not just internal corporate policies that can be quietly amended or ignored. The argument that, quote, any job is better than no job, is a dangerous justification for conditions that would be unacceptable in the company's home country. We should be advocating for decent work, living wages, the right to organize, and safe environments globally, not perpetuating a system where workers in one part of the world are seen as inherently deserving of less. This is the essence of the race to the bottom. It normalizes substandard conditions under the guise of providing opportunity. As for retraining and education in the home country, while laudable in principle, the reality is often that these programs are underfunded, slow to adapt, and simply inadequate for the sheer scale of job displacement caused by offshoring. The new industries that are supposed to absorb these workers may not materialize quickly enough, or they may offer lower pay and less security. We cannot overlook the profound human cost and the long-term community degradation that often follows mass layoffs. It's not just an economic transition. It's a disruption of lives and livelihoods. And let's be clear about where the profits from these lower labor costs predominantly go. Are they substantially passed on to consumers in the form of radically lower prices? Or do they primarily bolster executive compensation and shareholder dividends? Evidence often points to the latter, meaning the benefits are not as widely distributed as proponents suggest, and the quote, development in host countries is often built on a model that keeps wages suppressed to maintain that cost advantage.
We've heard compelling arguments about the responsibilities of businesses in this global landscape, but the picture is incomplete without considering the role of governments, both in the home countries where jobs are leaving and in the host countries where new operations are established. Ms. Rossi, you've highlighted the inadequacies of voluntary codes. What kind of specific regulations or international agreements do you believe could effectively mitigate the negative impacts you've described and ensure better protection for workers globally? And Dr. Carter, when we talk about the economic benefits of offshoring, particularly for host nations, how can governments and international bodies work with businesses to ensure these benefits are broadly shared? How can we foster sustainable development that genuinely uplifts communities, rather than merely serving the interests of a few or creating dependencies?
Sarah, ensuring benefits are broadly shared requires a multi-pronged approach. Host governments must implement policies that capture a fair share of the value created, through transparent taxation, for example, and reinvest this into public goods like education, healthcare, and infrastructure. They should also enforce strong labor laws that ensure workers receive fair wages and benefits. For their part, businesses should engage in local sourcing where feasible, invest in community development projects, and prioritize long-term partnerships over short-term gains. International agreements can support this by promoting good governance, transparency in financial flows, and standards for corporate social responsibility, ensuring that economic growth is inclusive and sustainable.
To effectively mitigate negative impacts, Sarah, we need robust, binding international agreements, not just voluntary guidelines. These should establish global minimum standards for wages, working conditions, and the right to unionize, with strong enforcement mechanisms and penalties for non-compliance. Trade agreements must incorporate enforceable labor and environmental clauses, making market access conditional on respecting these rights. Home country governments also have a role. They could legislate to hold their corporations accountable for their practices abroad, for instance, through mandatory human rights due diligence laws. Furthermore, greater transparency in supply chains, empowering workers and consumers with information, is crucial for accountability.
In closing, I maintain that the global integration of business operations, including offshoring, holds immense potential for positive change when approached ethically. It encourages vital competition, sparks innovation, and can be a significant conduit for spreading prosperity and technical expertise to developing regions. The key lies in responsible conduct and a commitment to mutual benefit, rather than a narrow pursuit of cost reduction at any price. Governments play an indispensable role in establishing fair trade frameworks, investing in their workforces through education and retraining, and ensuring social safety nets are in place to manage economic transitions effectively. For businesses, the imperative is to operate with transparency and unwavering accountability, upholding high ethical standards for labor and environmental practices globally. Rather than succumbing to protectionist impulses, we should champion responsible international engagement, striving collectively to elevate global standards and build a more interconnected and prosperous world for all.
Ultimately, this debate centers on a fundamental principle. Profit motives should never be allowed to supersede human dignity, worker rights, and the well-being of our communities, both at home and abroad. While economic efficiency is a valid consideration, the current dominant model of offshoring too often prioritizes corporate financial interests far above the legitimate rights and needs of the workforce that creates that wealth. We urgently need stronger national and international regulations that ensure genuine corporate accountability. This includes legally binding fair labor standards, the protection of workers' rights to organize and bargain collectively, and a more equitable distribution of the wealth generated through global trade. Development should mean tangible improvements in people's lives and an expansion of their rights, not a euphemism for exploitation. True progress lies in fostering a global economy built on justice, fairness, and shared prosperity, not one that sacrifices communities for cheaper goods or higher corporate returns.
Dr. Ben Carter, Ms. Maria Rossi, thank you both for this insightful and vigorous discussion. You've compellingly articulated the multifaceted ethical dilemmas surrounding the movement of jobs across borders. It's clear that finding a balance between economic imperatives, corporate social responsibility, and the profound human impact of these decisions is a complex challenge that requires ongoing dialogue and committed action. Thank you to our viewers for joining Global Perspectives. Good evening.